delivered by various eminent scholars. Today, 2017 talk on a glimpse of the first atoms, stars and galaxies of our universe is going to be delivered by Professor Ravi Subramanian, Director, Raman Research Institute, Bangalore. On behalf of Bangalore Science Forum and all of us here, it gives me immense pleasure and honor to welcome you, sir. Professor Ravi Subramanian graduated in BTech in Electronics from the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras in the year 1983. He then joined and worked at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. The research led to a PhD from the Department of Physics of Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in the year 1990. Later, he worked in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, India and Raman Research Institute in India and with research groups in Europe and Australia before taking up the position of Director of the Raman Research Institute in 2005. He was elected Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences and Indian Academy of Sciences. He received the Excellence Award by the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research Alumni Association in the year 2015. He was a member of the Governing Council, Indian Institute of Astrophysics in India during 2006-11. The Governing Council, Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational Sciences, India during 2006-11. The International Advisory Board, Publications of the Astronomical Society of Australia during 2013 and 14. The Steering Committee of SKA, India 2015 onwards. The International Astronomical Union. He was a partner investigator in CAA STRO, Art Center of Excellence for All Sky Astrophysics, and many more. With this brief introduction, once again I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Subramanian.
Thank you for having invited me here to give this talk. So I have titled this talk to be a glimpse of the first atoms, stars and galaxies of our universe. So I have titled this talk to be the first glimpse of the first atoms, stars and galaxies of our universe. And my intention here is to talk about what we are doing to look at the history of the evolution and formation of stars and galaxies and atoms in this universe. So I will be talking about the history over the last 13.7 billion years, where atoms formed, then stars formed, then galaxies formed. And that history I will talk about, and I will also talk about what we are doing at the Raman Institute and with collaborators around the world to know more about that history. And I will talk about what we know and what we don't know, and how our understanding is improving with time, and how in the future, in the next 20 years, we will know much more than what we know. So to start with, so we need to understand what is our universe made of. So we can take an example of buildings, and we can ask what are buildings made of. So most buildings that we see are made of bricks. They are made of bricks, stone, different objects that go into making the shape of buildings. And we don't say that buildings are made of atoms. We say that buildings are made of bricks. And the shape of buildings is the way bricks are arranged. to form the walls and roof and floors of buildings. So the way bricks are arranged tells us what is the shape and structure of buildings. So in the same way, we have to understand what are the bricks that make our universe. Just like bricks make our houses and buildings, so what are the bricks that make our universe? And the answer to that is that the bricks that make our universe are galaxies. So the universe is made of galaxies, just like buildings are made of bricks. Right? So we live in one brick of the universe, which is our own galaxy, which is called Milky Way. And I have a picture of what our Milky Way looks like. So this is how our galaxy looks like if we go away from our galaxy and look down. This is what our galaxy looks like. It has a kind of bar at the center, and it has multiple spiral arms. Our solar system is halfway between the center and the edge. So this is our galaxy. The universe is made of such galaxies. Just like bricks are roughly the same size, in the same way, galaxies come in a certain size. And there is a variety of kinds of bricks, there is a variety of kinds of galaxies. So what I have shown in the picture is the kind of galaxies that exist. So in this picture here, on this side you can see all these galaxies, and those galaxies are the galaxies that are near our own Milky Way galaxy. So we have our galaxy, and there are some galaxies around us, and the pictures that we see here are different types of galaxies that are there close by around us. So the galaxies are of different types. The galaxies have a bulge of stars. They also have a disk of stars. So galaxies can have a bulge as well as a disk. In some galaxies, the disk is more prominent. In some galaxies, the bulge is more prominent. So there are various kinds of stars. If the disk is more prominent, we call it spiral galaxies. If the bulge is more prominent, like this one, we call it elliptical galaxies. But those are just names. Every galaxy has a disk and a bulge. So these are the bricks. And if we look around us, so we are sitting in our Milky Way. These are galaxies around us. Now here you can see there are no galaxies. Then again there are some galaxies here. So there are places where there are less numbers of galaxies. There are places where there are more numbers of galaxies. So in between there are regions where there are less galaxies. So there is already structure close to our home. So then we can go far away and see how are these bricks, the galaxies, how are they distributed in the universe. So this is a picture of how galaxies are distributed in the universe. And what you can see here is we are in the center here, and we look out into the universe, and the galaxies are distributed. See, galaxies here are distributed like in a filament. In some regions there are less numbers of galaxies. Some places there are more galaxies. And these galaxies are distributed in filaments, in sheets, in balls, just like the distribution of bricks. Same way, galaxies are not just randomly distributed, they have patterns. So the galaxies also, distribution is not random, there are patterns. Okay? And the patterns that these galaxies form, you can see very clearly here. These patterns are what we call the structure of our universe. Our universe actually has some structure, which is decided by the way galaxies are distributed. So the whole idea behind the astronomy that we do is to understand the history of the universe that led to all these galaxies and their arrangement in these patterns. So we want to understand the history, and we want to understand the history in terms of the physics that we study in schools, in colleges. All of that is the physics that we have to use to understand the history of the universe. This same physics applies on the entire universe and across all time. This is all the physics. We have to know the physics of the laboratory. There is no new physics out there. It is only the physics that we study in schools and colleges. All that physics applies to understand the evolution that led to all this. So how do we understand this history? If we look at a city, so I have a picture of Bangalore city. If we look at a city and see city has structure, it has roads, it has lakes, it has forests in some places, parks somewhere, And we can understand this history, we can understand this geography by studying the history. If we want to know the geography of a city, why are the roads here, why are the lakes here, we can study the history of a city. Different people came at different times, they settled at different times, they built roads, and the history is what tells us why the city is the way it is. So we want to study history of the city to understand its geography. In the same way, if we want to understand the history of the universe, we want to understand why the universe is in a particular way, we have to look at the history. We have to understand why the universe is like this, how was it in the past. So we want to really look at the history of the universe, we want to look at its past. So the main thing that astronomers do is to look at the past and see how the universe evolved across time. So then how are we going to study the past? The speed of light is finite. We know that from our own laboratory experiments. So the speed of light is finite. The light travels 1 foot in 1 nanosecond. So it takes time to go from place to place. So when we look at the sun, it's 8 light minutes away. The children in school not really know that. But it means something different. If the light takes 8 minutes to come from the sun to us, it means that when we see the sun, it's not there, it's already gone little more. And the sun has already moved away when we see it somewhere. So when we see the sun rise, it's actually already visible. When we see the sun set, it's already set. So we are seeing the history. We are seeing how it was 8 minutes ago, not how it is right now. And that is true for everything that we see. If we look at the nearest star, it's 4 light years away, which means what we see is 4 years ago. We cannot see the present. If we go farther, the nearest galaxy, 200,000 light years, which means 200,000 years ago. We are seeing more in the history. If we go to the farthest galaxy, it's 10 billion light years, which means 10 billion years ago. The farthest galaxies that our telescopes can see are really looking into the past. We are seeing the galaxy in the past, not how it is today. So the basic way to look at the universe as we see the telescope is that as we look farther and farther by way of building bigger and bigger telescopes, we are also looking back in time. So when astronomers build bigger and bigger telescopes and they look deeper and deeper into the universe, we are actually looking back and back in time. We are looking at how the universe was in the past. So here is a picture of the sky taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. This is one of the most sensitive and deepest images of the sky ever made. And this picture shows us the faintest galaxies that a telescope can see. And these galaxies are a view of the universe as it was in the earlier times. Then we can take these distant galaxies and we can compare them with galaxies that we see nearby in our neighborhood as observed with telescopes that are much less powerful. And when we do the comparison, so these are galaxies far away in that deep image. These are galaxies nearby taken with smaller telescopes. And you can see that the galaxies far away are very different. These are very regular in shape. They have a concentration in the center and a disk outside is very regular. These are irregular blobs with patches of star formation in the gas. This is very irregular, this is very regular. So these simple pictures tell us that the universe in the past was not the same as what it is today. So the universe is changing. We know living in Bangalore city, the city changes, the universe also changes. Everything is changing. So this is the universe in the past, this is the universe today, it has changed. Just by taking pictures, we can see the change. There are other ways of seeing the change. There are galaxies where there is lots of star formation suddenly and they are called star-forming galaxies. There are galaxies in which there is lots of star formation, therefore it is very bright. Star-forming galaxies can be seen to far distances because they are bright, because there's lots of star formation. And the star-forming galaxies are places where gas is falling in from the universe and forming stars. So we can ask, what is the number of star-forming galaxies per unit volume at different times in the past, and we can count. And when we count that, we find that with time, the number of star-forming galaxies increases, and then it's now decreasing. This again tells us that the universe is a changing place. Once upon a time, there was much more star formation in the universe as compared to now. Now it's decreasing. The best is over. So the universe is a changing place. The same thing about quasars. Quasars are galaxies where there is something extremely bright at the center. And because these quasars are extremely bright at the center, there's a black hole in which matter is falling in and it's extremely bright, we can see it very far away. And if we take quasars and look at the numbers of quasars as a function of time, the numbers of quasars increase and then decrease. Today there are 30 times less quasars than there were when the universe was half its size, half its age. So the numbers of quasars changes dramatically with time. And we can do this because we can take telescopes and we can count how many quasars are there in a volume in the distance. And as a function of time, which means as a function of distance, we can count. And we know that with time, the numbers have actually changed. So we live in a changing universe. So all these observations by astronomers have showed us that the universe is a changing place. Right? It is not steady state, it is changing. And we know that simply because we built our telescopes and we can see the change. So here we are talking of change with time in stars and galaxies. What happens between stars and galaxies? Between stars and galaxies, there is gas. And we can ask, does the gas change with time? As stars and galaxies form, what happens to the gas between galaxies? Does it also change? To know how the gas changes, we have to see the gas. The way we see the gas is to look at quasar light. The quasar light comes to us, it comes to us through the gas. As it comes through the gas, where there is more gas, the gas actually scatters or absorbs the quasar light. And so as the light comes towards us, we see absorption because of gas between that quasar and us. So we can look at the gas through the disappearance of the light from the back as it is absorbed by the gas. And then if we look at quasars at different distances, this is the spectrum, which means the light that comes as a function of frequency of a quasar that is nearby. This is farther away, this is even farther away, and this is really far away. When you look at quasars very far away, almost all the light is gone, it's absorbed. Which means there's lots of gas. So far away, between quasars, between galaxies, there's lots of gas. As we come closer, there's little more light coming through, there's less gas. Then here you see that the absorption is in lots of lines, which means the gas has clumped to form lots of clumps of gas. Here, far away, the gas is uniformly distributed. With time, the gas has formed clumps, and then everything has disappeared because those clumps of gas have formed stars and the gas has disappeared. So we can see here that as the gas disappears, galaxies, stars appear. Because this gas has become stars and galaxies. So that evolution is something that we can actually see with our telescopes. So all this leads to a certain picture of our universe. So we live in the center. That's our galaxy. So we live in the center, and as we look out into our universe, we see galaxies around us. And as we look farther and farther, we can see more and more, we can see galaxies back in time. We see galaxies with our best telescopes out to a certain distance, which means back to a certain time. Right? So around us, when we look in any direction, we see galaxies farther and farther away, back and back in time, and after a certain distance, we don't see galaxies. Our most powerful telescopes cannot see galaxies beyond a certain distance, which means before a certain time. And the reason is that before a certain time in the universe, there were no galaxies to see. So beyond a certain distance, we don't see galaxies because there are no galaxies to see. There were no galaxies formed out of gas. Beyond a certain distance, it was only gas, which we can't see with telescopes. So we can only see galaxies to a certain distance. And that is our universe around us. So this is the picture that we can see of universe around us. With an optical telescope, this is what we can see around us. Beyond that, there were no galaxies formed in the past time. And this time is what we call dark ages. It's dark because there was no light. There were no galaxies, stars to give you light. So we call it dark ages. So this is the picture of what we can see of our universe in optical light, with optical telescopes. So if we take a light of the sky at night, we will see light at different wavelengths. We actually see light in radio, in infrared, optical, X-rays, gamma rays, and all that light comes from all the galaxies and stars that we see around us. If we take all of this light, the light that comes, we can identify it with different stars and galaxies that we see over this distance. None of this light comes from beyond. So all the light that we can see, from all the radio waves that we see, come from different black holes in galaxies that we see. So we can identify all this light with all these objects. And all the light that we get is also coming from all these objects. So it's not just in the optical, but across the electromagnetic spectrum. So this was this story until some point. So how do you go beyond this? How do we see the universe at earlier times? We can't see it in optical light. How do we see the universe beyond this? It means back in time. So the story started in 1964, and two engineer scientists, Penzias and Wilson, they built this horn, they had this horn antenna, and they detected a radio noise from the sky, which did not come from any of these galaxies or stars. They were the first to detect a light in the sky in radio waves, which did not come from any of the galaxies. It came from beyond the galaxies. And they got the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1978 for detecting this extra light. They found that at radio waves, the sky was extremely bright. It was bright between the galaxies, but there was nothing. It came from beyond. And that was a discovery. So they were, for the first time, they saw light that came from beyond all the galaxies that we see. So this light actually is in radio waves, and it comes from somewhere here, way beyond all that gas. It comes from really early at times, far away, and they detected that light. So this light that they detected was when the universe was very much younger. The universe was only 400,000 years at that time, and they detected a bright light. This showed that the gas at that time was very hot. It showed that the gas was hot, and therefore it was bright, and way back there, the gas was so hot and bright that it was bright in, and that light is being seen today, not in optical, but in radio waves. So they were the first to show that the universe is actually expanding. And at one point, the universe was hot. So they were the first people to confirm that we live in a changing time, but what is called a Big Bang universe. So we call it hot Big Bang universe. Because once upon a time, the universe was hot, and then that has now cooled and has expanded to form what we are today. So they proved that we live in an expanding universe, and that it is an expanding changing universe, and we can measure the time. It is 14 billion years. So together with seeing galaxies far away and seeing galaxies nearby and fitting this early universe, we know that we live in a Big Bang universe. We are not in a steady state universe. So this early universe that I showed you here, this hot gas that is here was detected by Penzias and Wilson, and then many people later detected that same radiation at different wavelengths. So at the Raman Institute, in 1995, we built an antenna, and we carefully designed this with shields to protect it from the ground. We built a receiver with a kind of antenna on top to detect this radiation, and the whole thing was assembled in this manner to detect the radiation at 20 megahertz, and we detected again that glow between the stars from far away. And many others have also done this. The NASA then built a satellite to look at this radiation that comes from the distance in detail. So they built this satellite, and in the center they built an instrument to look at that radiation. And this telescope as a satellite was designed to look at the light that came from that time. So the instrument itself, it had a long horn antenna looking at the sky. It had a calibrator that could be put in. That light came, it had beam splitters. The light was split, and then it came to detectors, and it had a reference black body radiation also for internal calibration. The whole thing was put in a box, and this was 2 meters long. The entire thing was put inside the satellite, and in 1989 the satellite was launched, and it gave you a spectrum of the light from the early times, and that spectrum looked like this. That spectrum is identical to what we expect from a black body. It is identical to the spectrum of the sun, except that the peak is in millimeters, whereas the light from the sun is peaks in the visible. So the shape is the same, but it is shifted. So it is red shifted. This is proof that the universe is expanding. So at that time, this came from a region which was as bright as the sun, but because the universe has expanded, the wavelengths have been stretched, and that light now comes to us at radio waves, whereas it was emitted in the optical. The shape is the same, but the wavelength has been shifted, and the intensity has been reduced. So this was the measurement made by the satellite. So many of us did these measurements from the ground, and altogether, this is the spectrum of that light that is there in the sky that comes from beyond all of the galaxies. So this is the picture we have. This is an image of the light that is behind. When the universe was 400,000 years old, that light comes from behind. In front, we have all these galaxies. And when we look at the sky, we see all these galaxies. These galaxies are in front, and this light is in the back. So that is like a backlight, and we see all the galaxies in front with that behind. That is our picture of the universe. With optical telescopes, we could see only this, but now that we have radio telescopes, we can see all this as well. So this is an invisible part of the universe which we can see today because we have built radio telescopes. Right? So really, when you look at this, it is our vision of the early universe. When we look at this light, we are actually looking at the universe when it was 400,000 years. Just like when we look at the light from the wall, we are seeing the wall. Same way, when we look at this light, we are seeing the universe. So in this light, we can actually see the universe at that time. And then the question came, this light, is it completely uniform, or should it have variations? Now, this is a view of the universe. Could the universe have been uniform at that time? If the universe was uniform, it could never have formed galaxies and all the structure that we have. We can't make something with nothing. So the universe at that time must have had some variations in density. And then you can theoretically predict, because we know gravity and we know the laws of gravity. If that density at that time was not uniform and it had small inhomogeneities, we know how much time has lapsed. So we can predict how much the density inhomogeneities would grow. And so we can predict, given that we have galaxies today, how much must be the variation at that time. So we can predict how non-uniform that light must be. And those predictions were made. And then to test those predictions, the same satellite had another instrument to measure the variations in the intensity. And to measure variations, you want differential measurement. So the satellite had differential radiometers which looked in different directions. So they were put on the side of that whole structure. And these differential radiometers measured the differences between the intensity in different directions. So when this was launched, it went around the Earth, and the satellite always looked away from the Earth. It was also spinning. So it was a differential measurement which was spinning on the satellite, and the satellite made a differential map of the entire sky. So the satellite gave us this map of the sky. It was a differential map. It was mostly smooth, but if you subtract off the constant, then you start seeing patterns. These variations are at the level of 30 microkelvin, whereas this is 3 Kelvin. Since this radiation was emitted, the universe is expanded by a factor of 1,000. Therefore, this light that is there in which is 3 Kelvin black body temperature today, when it was emitted, it was 3,000 Kelvin, almost as hot as the sun. The variations in this are at 30 microkelvin, which means 1 part in 10 minus 5. And the theory predicts that for these variations, we will expect to form all the galaxies today. This was a prediction, and that is well confirmed. So there is consistency between what we see here and the formation of all the structure. So this is an image of the variations in the matter distribution and when the universe was 400,000 years. We are actually seeing those variations in density of the gas. So it's a picture of the density variations in the gas. So then people build satellites to look at this density variation in greater and greater detail. So this WMAP satellite was built, and if you want to look at things in greater detail, you want to make radio antennas with bigger sizes so that you can have higher resolution. So this one, instead of having this radiometer horns, it had dish-type antennas which look in 2 different directions. And it gave this image, where the original satellite had given this image. This new satellite, WMAP, gave this much more detailed image. So now we have a much more detailed picture of the early universe as it was at that early time. More recently, we have the Planck satellite which has given an even more detailed image. So we are seeing the early universe in greater and greater detail. To see finer detail, we make bigger and bigger telescopes on Earth itself, even without going to space. And these are examples of telescopes in Chile and at the South Pole which have made greater resolution images. There's also a telescope in Australia which some of us here have used to make an image with even greater detail. And finally, today we have very detailed images of that early universe. It's so detailed that you can see the distribution of gas in great detail. And if you really carefully look at that gas distribution, you can also now begin to see black spots. And these black spots here are because that is a backlight. We are seeing that far away universe, when it was 300,000 years, through all the galaxies and clusters of galaxies that are there nearby. And here nearby, these galaxies and clusters have gas in them. And when that backlight comes through the galaxies and clusters, it actually scatters away that backlight. So these really are shadows of the galaxies and clusters of galaxies in the foreground. So we also see them as shadows. In optical, if you look at these same black regions, you will see galaxies. But they are blocking the backlight. So this is the detail to which we have now made images of that history. So today we have come a long way. So we have studied galaxies out to the edge before which there were no galaxies. We have gone beyond and looked at the universe when it was just 400,000 years from the Big Bang, when it was so young. And then the question is, what next? So having done all this and gone to such extent, what can we do next? So if we look at this history, this is 400,000 years. So we have seen that. We have seen that in explicit detail. We have seen all the galaxies that we can see out to the edge. But there is this gap in the history which we have never seen. We have never seen, see, this 400,000 years is when the first atoms actually formed. That light is when the first atoms formed. Because that is when the first electrons and protons combined to form atoms. And then the universe became neutral and transparent. That is like the surface. That is the surface that we see. Here it is gas. This gas does not emit. It does not emit optical light because there were no stars. Somewhere here, the universe of gas transformed into stars and galaxies, and then we see all this. This transformation we have not seen. We have never seen. So this is what is called the dark ages. And then somewhere here, the first light appears as the first stars form. We call that cosmic dawn. And the challenge for us now, having come this far, is to now study this time of the universe. We want to look at this dark ages and how the first stars and galaxies formed, and how the universe transitioned from this hot gas to cooler gas, and then how did the galaxies and stars form to transform that gas into the universe that we know today. This transformation is our next challenge. And what I will talk in the next 15 minutes is what are we doing about this, what are we doing, and what are we in Bangalore in the Raman Institute doing to answer these questions. So the first question is, there is no optical light from this gas. So how can we even see the gas? There are no quasars in this place, so there is no backlight in which we can see this gas as absorption. So how can we even detect this gas? It's almost totally hydrogen gas. There are about 10 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of helium in that ratio, but it's almost completely hydrogen and helium atoms. There is no emission of optical light. So how do we see the hydrogen gas? And the way to see hydrogen gas is hydrogen atoms, they have a proton and an electron. Protons and electrons also have spin. They have magnetic moments. If the magnetic moments are parallel, the atom has a certain energy. If the spins are anti-parallel, the energy is slightly less, is very slight, is far, far less than the 13 electron volts compared to atomic transition, the electron transitions. It's called a hyperfine transition. It's a very small energy difference, and the atoms can go through this transformation from a parallel to an anti-parallel state. And when that transition spontaneously happens, the atoms of hydrogen will emit a photon at 1420 megahertz, which is a radio wave. The energy is very little, but atoms of hydrogen do emit at this frequency. And we do detect hydrogen in our galaxy emitting at this frequency. And so the challenge is to detect hydrogen from this emission in the dark ages while the universe transformed. So the only way we can look at gas at that time is to build radio telescopes that can detect this 1420 megahertz emission from the gas in that part of the universe. So the radio waves from the gas in the universe, they are emitted at 1420 megahertz. That is a wavelength of 21 centimeters. When they come to us, the universe is also expanding. From then to now, the universe actually expands by a factor of about 10. So the radiation will not come to us at 1420 megahertz. It will come to us 10 times stretched. So it will come to us between 30 and 200 megahertz. Much lower frequencies. These are the frequencies at which you have emission on Earth from FM stations, TV stations. So it is very, very difficult for us to detect this radiation in the presence of all this other emission that we have on Earth. So when the universe transformed after the first atoms formed, it became neutral gas. That neutral gas then slowly transformed. And during that time, the gas first cools with expansion. As the gas cools, that gas actually begins to absorb that radiation that comes from the background. Later, that gas again begins to heat up. And here, when the first stars begin to form, what happens is that the first gas cools, then somewhere here the first stars form. When the first stars form, there is Lyman alpha. That again causes this hydrogen to give you a much lower absorption. Then the Lyman alpha is followed by X-rays and ultraviolet. The X-rays heat the hydrogen gas and make this gas go into emission. And then the ultraviolet ionizes the gas and the whole thing disappears. So this has been theoretically predicted. And there are different models that as the gas of hydrogen evolves to form the first stars, and then the stars put out light, and then they transform the gas around them, the hydrogen emission will change in a specific manner. It will go into absorption dip and then emission and then disappear. This is a prediction. But the prediction is uncertain. We don't know exactly how this happens. We have different theories for how this happens. And here I have shown you different theories, all of which are consistent with our current knowledge. We don't know exactly how this proceeded, but somewhere, and it can happen at different times, but finally it is going from some particular state to a particular state as a function of time. The exact transformation is not known, therefore we need to do observations, build telescopes to know how that gas transformed and when and how the first stars formed. So really what we want to do is to make telescopes that can make pictures of the sky at different frequencies. So we want to build telescopes that can make pictures of the sky at different frequencies. And if you look at the sky at a particular frequency, you are looking at hydrogen where the expansion took it to that frequency, which means as you go in frequency, you are going in time. So when you make pictures at different frequencies, you are actually making pictures at different times. As you go to higher frequencies, you are going forward in time, closer to us. Because low frequencies is back in time. When the emission at 1420 would have had more time to expand and come to a low frequency. So when you make pictures at different frequencies, you can actually, it is slicing the universe of gas at different times. Right? So this requires making telescopes that can make pictures at different frequencies. So there are predictions. How the universe should look at 70 megahertz, 90, 110, 130, 160. This is a prediction in a particular theory. Different theories predict different images for how the sky should look like at different frequencies. So our goal really is to build telescopes that can go through a wide range of frequencies across FM and TV bands to look at the sky at these frequencies. And we have to make detailed images, very sensitive images. So this exercise requires building large telescopes, and since we have to operate at frequencies that are in the FM and TV band, we have to go away from cities, away from any place where there are civilization. So some years ago, the Raman Institute entered into a collaboration. We entered into a partnership with US, Australia and New Zealand partners. So there's a whole range of universities that we joined with. And we decided to make a telescope which is called the Murchison Whitefield Array. And we decided to make this telescope and put it 800 kilometers from Perth in the Western Australian desert, where no one lives. It's as far as you can get from civilization. So to do this, we started building this telescope a few years ago out in the Australian desert. So this is where we put the telescope. It's 800 kilometers from, there's no road also, but this is the region. It's completely flat land, middle of nowhere, nobody lives. So for this telescope, all the electronics is actually being done at the Raman Institute here. We design it here, we build the cards here, and you probably have some pictures. Finally, this is what the antennas look like. The telescope is not like the telescopes that you know, it's a radio telescope. It works at all the way from about 100 megahertz to 300 megahertz. It works at very low frequencies. And so it is antennas on the ground. So the telescope has lots of these antennas on the ground, connected up with cables. The electronics was all built here. So the electronics was built in cards to take the signals from all these antennas and send it to a central station. And these cards were designed in the Raman Institute. We built it locally, we put it in boxes, and the boxes go out in the field. And then in the field today, we have 128 such antennas out in the desert. We already built it. This is not for the future. This is actually built. So all these antennas are out over 3 kilometers in the desert. And this is what it looks like on the ground. In between the trees, all these antennas are there, over 3 kilometers. And these receivers are all built and designed here. So this is an effort that is happening today. We have built this. We are getting the data. People here, along with our partners in the world, we are analyzing it to make these images. People think it is years of effort, and as we progress, we are also continuing to build these to bigger and bigger telescopes. So we are part of a much bigger project. And in fact, India is now part of a mega project in science to build a much bigger telescope to do this in much more detail. So as we do this, we do it in some detail. Then we build telescopes to do it in much better detail. And so this is a project we are into over the next 5 years to build much bigger telescopes in the Australian and South African deserts. So since we built all the receivers, we also had a visit from the Science Minister of Australia when he was in Bangalore, and this is him in our lab here with the receivers and the people who built it. See, these large telescopes are there to make pictures of the universe at different times. And it is good to make these large telescopes in big collaborations which require a lot of effort, countries coming together to make these big telescopes to do the science of detailed evolution of the universe. But we don't have to only do it that way. We can also look at how the gas evolved with time by looking at its effect on the spectrum of the radiation of the sky. As I mentioned earlier, as the gas evolves, there is a structure that evolves, but if you look at the mean properties of the gas in the universe as a function of time, the mean properties of the gas also changes with time. And therefore, if you look at the spectrum of the sky as a function of frequencies, and this is a band all the way from 10 to 200 megahertz, the spectrum of the light, the amount of light that we get as a function of frequency across this band will change. And that simple change is a measure of the entire evolution. It is not telling you all the details, but it is telling you the average gross evolution. So another way of approaching the same problem is not to go for the detailed pictures, but to just make a simple spectrum of the sky at low frequencies. This doesn't require huge telescopes. So some years ago, a few of us here at the Raman Institute, we started a project with some collaborators elsewhere to build telescopes, small teams, just to do this. So this is another way of exploring the evolution of the universe, which doesn't require huge teams, huge collaborations. So we started inventing and designing telescopes. These telescopes are really radio telescopes that work at low frequencies over wide bandwidths. So we invented these are real telescopes. And we have gone through an evolution of different kinds of telescopes. And this is the kind of telescope we have today. So we evolved. We built telescopes that work over wide bandwidths, that can make accurate spectra, and we are improving our sensitivity to detect the change in the spectrum over a wide bandwidth, so over a wide range of angles. So at Alumni, we have built the receivers, we package them into boxes so that they do not radiate into our antennas. We have to be very careful. So we build the card, we put a laptop there to record the data, we close all this. It's a sealed system. And then we deploy these. and we have deployed them at Kavirisdal initially. Then we have also taken them to Western Australia to deploy them in the desert. We have also tried different kinds of antennas to look at the same radiation. And then we went into an exercise of looking for what is the best place on Earth to do such experiments. Because we want to be in places away from all FM and TV. So we looked around. We went to different parts of Ooty, in Tamil Nadu, in northern Karnataka. We took a test antenna to different places to look at how radio quiet these sites are. And finally we found one very good site. And the best site we can find in India is in the Tibetan Plateau. In the dry desert up there at 4,500 meters altitude. It's absolutely dry. There is no grass, there is nothing there, there are no human beings, there is no FM, there is no TV. So this is 80 kilometers north of Bangalore. You can see lots of radio interference. All this is the FM. And then later the TV comes up. Out there is absolutely nothing. There is one line, and this line is from satellites, which we can never avoid. So in the last 1 month, we have taken our systems out to the desert. We have started taking data there in expeditions, and that's the way we are progressing. And this is our futuristic plan. And some months ago, we had a visit from Harshvardhan, Minister of Science, who came and started understanding what we are doing. Thank you.
Audience of the Bangalore Science Forum. Till now, we had a wonderful journey into the universe past. The telescopes, orbiting telescopes, are new windows to look at the universe. Professor took us, Ravi Subramanian took us to the universe, evolution of the universe, in the eyes of Hubble, UV, WMAP, and Planck, and the latest efforts that the Institute is making in understanding the dark ages and the evolution of the universe. Sir, it was a very knowledgeable lecture, I can say. On behalf of all the audience present here and on behalf of the Bangalore Science Forum, I extend a wonderful vote of thanks. We have a relatively related subject, that is our gravitational waves, A and B coefficients of cosmological constant, A and B coefficients and cosmological constant. This is in relation to centenary of Einstein's trilogy. The lecture will be delivered by Dr. C. Shivaram, Senior Professor, Indian Institute of Astrophysics. On 22nd, we have Dr. S.S. Srikanta, Medical Director, Senior Consultant, Endocrinology and Diabetes, Samatvam Endocrinology Diabetes Center. He will be speaking on insulin, diabetes and other issues. And on 24th, we have a very interesting lecture on Hridayam and Hridayavantiki. There are some of the lectures which are in Kannada also. Like this, we have you are all welcome for all the lectures. Now, the session is formally open for question and answer.
Approximate size of the galaxies. Approximate size of the galaxy.
It's about 30,000 light years.
Sir, you have taken us a very good journey of the universe. Sir, you have made a lot of observations in the universe. Sir. Have you come across any other solar systems in the universe, sir?
So there have not been, but the astronomy community has created many stars with planets around them. There are lots of stars with planets, and that is today known.
Some time back we heard the prediction that the universe has many solar systems like that. And one more simple question I wanted to ask you, sir. See, in the night time, sometime I used to gaze the sky. Some stars will be moving like this. So, some stars will be. So there are some stars stationary, and some stars will be. I see just traveling with some distance. What is that effect I wanted to? Ask you. Okay, sir. Thank you.
So in the beginning, we showed in one slide that our galaxy is surrounded by other galaxies, and similarly some other galaxies. And in some region, there are so many number of galaxies more, and some region there are less. So what happens? What are the effects of these things on our galaxy?
So our galaxy is surrounded by galaxies, and in some regions there are no galaxies. So there is a gravitational influence of galaxies on each other.
Correct.
So galaxies are moving under the effect of the gravitational field, which is determined by all of the galaxies together. So galaxies are moving. So the Andromeda galaxy, which is nearby, is moving towards us because it is big.
That effect is going to affect our solar system.
Yes, it will affect on long time scales because galaxies are attracted by each other. Galaxies will merge, and when that happens, solar systems will be and people get perturbed. But that's a very, very long time scale.
I mean, irregularly there will be no much changes in our solar system motions on the planets and all. Thank you.
So what is the cost of the current project that you are doing in collaboration with the Australian universities?
So totally, the entire effort that we have put in over 10 years has probably costed about 3 crores.
3 crores.
Yes.
That's what's
Thank you, sir. It's a wonderful, mind-boggling picture. You said the galaxy width is about 30,000 light years,
Yes.
and we are talking about billions of years.
Yes.
Somewhere the galaxies are moving, and it may affect our solar system that lady also asked. But the moving speed will be in terms of light years. We are not realizing how fast we are getting rotated in our Earth itself. It looks stationary. And the galaxies are moving at the speed of light years. And when it will hit...
No, not light years.
Beyond...
No, the speeds at which galaxies move are a few hundred kilometers per second.
Slow.
It's not light years.
It's almost stationary.
It's much slower.
So there is no fear that Andromeda will come and hit us.
It will, but it will take billions of years.
Thank you for excellent. Where does this point where the Big Bang happened? Like today, I get the coordinates from reference to Earth.
We cannot give a place where it happened.
And how does it work?
Okay, so the way we understand, the way astronomers understand the Big Bang for us is a changing universe. So we see the universe to be changing and expanding, and we call a changing, expanding universe as the Big Bang universe. It doesn't mean that there was an event. There may never have been an event.
There could be all the matter must have started from one single point.
We don't know. We can never tell.
Then it must be all over the space. When you said bigger than smaller,
See, we can only infer what we can see. So we can see things to a certain point. For example, the radio waves that I showed pictures of from 400,000 years after the Big Bang, that is a surface that we can see. Now, that surface is like the surface of the sun. Since the universe is expanding, if you want to know what happened before that, it is like going inside the sun. How do you see inside the sun? You cannot. Therefore, we can't see beyond this. We can only have theories. And theories are limited.
So what begins us to end there? The universe is going to end beyond it. What begins it us to end?
Yeah, but it is not beginning, does not have end.
Like you said, Big Bang theory is started.
No. The Big Bang for us is an expanding, changing universe. We only know it for some past history. We do not know what happened before some time. We don't even try to theorize because we do not have the theoretical means of probing what happened before. We can only go up to a certain time in the past. We cannot go before that. We don't even have the theories to do it or the observational means. So we don't imagine anything.
Is there a limitation for expansion? Is there a good stop?
No, there is no limitation.
Sir, you have placed any instruments in AstroSat?
You mean the Raman Institute? Yeah, the Raman Institute is involved in one instrument on AstroSat that's called LAX-PC, which is a large area X-ray proportional counter, which is on AstroSat. And so the payload operation center where data comes and is analyzed is in the Raman Institute.
Then these colors of different radio frequencies, it has got something to do with sun radiation or galaxy.
Yeah.
Say for example 70 megahertz.
Yeah, so
what is the color used?
Correct. So
what is 30 megahertz? What is
correct. So just like in optical, different colors are different wavelengths, which is different frequencies. In the same way, radio waves also come in different wavelengths and frequencies. We don't ascribe colors because colors are already used to describe all the rainbow colors. So in the radio band, different parts of the band, we call them by different letter names. We have names.
Let's say rainbow colors.
There are so many, say 7 colors.
No. We call them by different names. For 300 megahertz, we call it P band. We call it different letters. There are different names.
Thank you.
Sir, in your lecture, you did not touch upon dark energy or dark matter. That is, dark energy was discovered about 25, 30 years back.
Yes.
And that is one of the reasons for the expansion of the universe. There's also the space between the galaxies. Has any light been thrown upon the constitution of the composition of dark energy as it?
We know that dark matter exists. And we know
80%, about 80% or something.
that is the dark energy. So, the way dark energy works is that the expansion of the universe is described by means of gravity. So Newton had his theory of gravity. After that, Einstein improved the theory of gravity. So the current best theory we have for gravity is Einstein's theory of gravity. Einstein's theory of gravity predicts more precisely how the Earth goes around the Sun as compared to Newton's theory. Newton's theory is not exact, Einstein's theory is more exact. When we want to study the expansion of the universe, we use Einstein's theory because it is the gravitational influence of the universe as a whole. When we do that and apply Einstein's theory, there are different terms in Einstein's theory. You'll probably hear about it in tomorrow's talk. But the one term that Einstein introduced at the beginning is a term which was a lambda, a constant, which is called a cosmological constant. And he introduced that as an attractive term which a repulsive term that counteracted the attractive form of gravity. Because he felt intuitively that the universe cannot be expanding, it must be static. At that time, no one had these observations. So he intuitively felt the universe must be static, it must be steady state, it cannot be expanding and changing. So he put that term. Right? Later he considered that his biggest blunder, because the universe is not static. Right? But today that term has come back. And that term is what is today taken to be the reason for the continued expansion of the universe. So that is actually counteracting gravity and causing expansion. But that is a term in the theory of gravity. It is not an extra thing in the universe. It is a part of the geometry of the universe we live in. So it is part of the gravitational theory rather than something material outside, which causes the expansion.
Is dark energy matter also?
No, it is just a term in the theory of gravity.
What is the lowest frequency that you will be thinking of? Because due to the redshift, you have come to FM band now. It can be even much lower.
Yeah,
Is it our limitation that we are checking in the antenna of FM band, or should we go to very much lower than?
Yeah. So we can only go to certain frequencies. If we want to go to lower and lower frequencies, which we would like to, we are limited by the ionosphere of the Earth. The ionosphere of the Earth limits us because it is absorbed. Therefore, we have to go to space. So there are plans in the future of exploring lower frequencies, but we can't do it from the Earth. The best place that it can be done is from the far side of the moon.
No, what is the lowest frequency we can design an antenna? Because
antenna
when you come to even audio band type of radio frequency,
there is no limitation.
So you were saying the last question, sir?
The Hubble telescope, I think, an optic telescope. Is there any radio telescope in the space?
There is a radio telescope that has been built by Russia that we put in space. And see, radio telescopes are used to make images of the sky. And if we want to make high resolution images, we use arrays of antennas. So what I showed, the picture that I showed in the Australian desert is lots of pieces of antennas. They together form a telescope which is several kilometers in size. You can get higher resolution by building antennas and spacing them farther apart. If you have one antenna in space and other antennas in the ground, you can have longer spacings and so finer resolution. So to look at quasars with very great detail in resolution, Russians put a telescope in space, in orbit, in a very elliptical orbit, to get high resolution. So it's been done.
Thank you very much. We can discuss.